and welcome to the CoRobotics YouTube channel, which is a partnership between the Universities of Lincoln, Nottingham-Trent and De Montfort in Leicester. We are part of the Midlands Enterprise Universities Network, and this channel has been supported by an Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council's UK Robotics and Automation Systems Network grant. In this video, we're going to be discussing between us latest trends in industrial automation and optimization. I'm Tracy Harwood, Professor of Digital Culture at the Institute of Creative Technologies, De Montfort, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Mark Hanheide, who is Professor of Intelligent Robotics and Interactive Systems in the School of Computer Science at the University of Lincoln, and also Director of the Lincoln Centre for Autonomous Systems, and Philip Breedon, who is Professor of Smart Technologies at Nottingham-Trent University and leads its Medical Engineering and Design Research Group. So I'm going to be asking the questions today, and my colleagues are going to be doing the answering. So let's start by asking then, what are the latest trends in industrial automation? Mark, do you want to kick us off on this?
Well, as you know, the disclaimer, of course, I have my own specific views on these, but thank you, Tracy. I think what is clearly, what we clearly see is in response to a lot of the challenges that we have, in particular in the UK, to get the right labor we need to actually have people in there. We're all aware of some labor shortages, etc., that there is clearly a trend towards automation and towards introduction of robotics into manufacturing and production processes, more and more prevalent in a number of sectors. The big challenges, of course, is that there is a lot of promise at the moment, I would say, about robotics being able to feed in, but that the big challenges in that domain are, on the one hand, technological, and on the other hand, the sort of more societal ones is about the change of workflows and the level of adaptation and acceptance we have with robots entering a production environment. So from a technological point of view, I think there is one of the biggest challenges overall, and probably this is something that we see where the sector still has to adapt a little bit, is the system integration perspective. Because we as a university, we do a lot of research, of course, on robotics, on specific aspects of robotics, having robots that can better understand what the humans may want, makes them safe interacting with humans, collaborating with them, being much more flexible in the workflows that they can actually automate by all the advances we have from deep learning, from computer vision, that they don't have to be just doing this thing, what robotics have been doing all the time, going to this specific place and then moving on to this specific place and doing this 10,000 times a day in incredible speed. The real change that we see now is this sort of, in the context also of Industry 4.0, mass customization. So we don't want to produce 10,000 items of the very same kind. We want to actually adapt a little bit what they want to do, what the actual end product should look like. And of course, historically, that is the domain of humans, right? That's the way they are excelling in, because they can adapt very quickly. And if it says like, oh yeah, I want this in a slightly different shape or form, that's where humans are very good at. And what we see now with the progress in robotics and machine learning and AI is clearly that we can more quickly adapt what these robots are doing for specific customizations. Now, that's all nice, but indeed the challenge, as I said before, comes from this system integration perspective, in my view, where it is not this insular robots system, but it needs to be embedded into the overall production pipeline, production flow. And there's lots of trends that I have also seen very recently, is that the modularization of automation pipelines is key here, so that we have got quite flexible individual work cells that can be put together, that may be actually, you know, a feeding system of like conveyor belt to a cell where a human is working with a robot, that is then maybe connected to a cell where there's a robot on its own doing something. So really this sort of almost Lego type of production pipelines where we just build take the different building blocks and put them together is, in my view, a clear trend. But I don't think there is yet a full-scale solution that we can just say, well, you know, here's the set, order it from these different building blocks to put them together. There is clearly players that are working towards that, but I think that's one of the key trends and challenges.
I think just to add to that, Mark, as well, and I totally agree. I mean, from my experience as well, you mentioned, the existing production lines or legacy lines, as they're known, linked to, and clearly people and factories and industry is not going to change overnight to Industry 4.0. And I guess, not widespread, but we are seeing some reluctance from industry to integrate new technology into their existing legacy lines. And that obviously is not easy. There's also the cost to think about, and obviously working with the existing workforce to help with that integration and to bring those people on board, support that moving forward. So I think everybody respects and understands as much as we can. Obviously every individual business has their own challenges, but there are significant challenges. But this step to Industry 4.0 won't happen overnight for any company, I would suggest. And for SMEs, there are significant more challenges because of, as I mentioned, the cost and the systems. And I think we have to bear in mind, we're talking about CoRobotics on this channel as well. But of course, it's not just about buying a robot from a supplier or a co-robot. It's of course surrounding a system and the integration of that system. And a lot of smaller companies particularly don't have the luxury of employing an external company or consultants to help integrate that technology. So I think what we're seeing as well is that companies and particular SMEs don't have access or are unsure how to get that support to integrate these systems into their existing legacy lines.
If I can, oh yeah, sorry, Tracy.
Well, I was going to say, do you think, is that something that your research teams are helping figure out? Is that what you're working on at the moment?
Personally, as I mentioned briefly in the introductory opening video that we recorded, we are fortunately working with quite a big global company in terms of technology evaluation, really. So they are fortunate being a big international company to have access to a technology integrator. But we've almost at NTU become a sort of a pre-step to that we're evaluating the technology before the technology integrator actually introduces it into a cell, maybe for a production line. But of course, that is an enormously expensive step, if you like, to employ somebody or an integrator to build the cell for you. And again, a lot of SMEs just can't access this or access the expertise to help and support them in doing this kind of activity.
Mark, you were going to say? Yeah,
so I think what I find interesting, we've been engaged in, we've had a former European project, and we have got another one at the moment running, which is really about intralogistics. So it's about automating warehouses effectively, right? Transportation paths with robotic systems in warehouses. Now you would say what is the research question there still? Because there's loads and loads in there. We're all aware of the Kiva systems, the Amazon warehouses, or the Swisslog systems, etc. So there's lots in there in the whole intralogistics automation already. Now, what they all require is quite substantial investment up front. So they all often rely on purpose-built warehouses that have automation at heart. And what in both these projects, one is called Iliad, that was concluded 2 years ago, and we've got a follow-up that's called DARCO. People want to look that up. But the whole point there is that we're making the deployment easier, so that integration easier. So you don't need to have millions of investment into the infrastructure. You're basically introducing automation into an existing workflow and into an existing environment. And I think that is a key challenge, and in particular also for the UK, that is quite important, given the numbers of SMEs we've got. We've got a lot of small businesses as well, who, of course, probably are not in a position to immediately say, I'm going to check out 50 million here to build a new fully automated warehouse. I'm often operating on this Pareto principle here, right? So we can probably get 80% of the benefit of automation for the 20% of the cost. We're not going to get 100% of automated workflows, but we can probably quite easily automate 80%. I think that's the sort of nice cost benefit balance that you want to establish. And that is, I think, where the potential of also all this, in the wider sense, cobot solutions can lie, right? That we can actually provide a pathway towards automation and introduction of robotics to optimize workflows without going, right, tabula rasa, we're going to start all over again and do something properly this time. Let's actually be on a journey.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the technology is moving so rapidly, and the advancements in the engineering side, you know, the physical machinery side, that, you know, a complete carte blanche approach is probably unrealistic in any event for a long-term development strategy.
Yeah, and I think I mean, we're talking about co-robotics, and you mentioned again there, Tracy, and I think, you know, people are still looking at, you know, what potentially they can offer. I think some people, if you do a quick Google search for co-robotics, you'll probably find the classic of a robot sitting, you know, or sitting or being mounted next to a human being on a production line, and clearly, you know, that's one of the perceptions, and indeed one of the applications. But you know, you're seeing them working collaboratively alongside humans now, doing so many more operations, for example, loading press tools or helping with palletization as well. So, you know, it's not just this. I think there's, as I say, there is this classic of a robot and then a person on the production line next to each other. And of course, that can be a little bit misleading as well in terms of application, I think.
Mm. And the modularization idea, that's a relatively straightforward way to think about how to scale. Yes,
I think that is a way of how we can facilitate this journey towards automation, right? Where you can introduce individual building blocks and say, like, here is a part that we can automate already. We adjusting, we're interfacing it with our existing processes.
sure.
What I also wanted to kind of quickly highlight is this aspect that at the moment, if you look at robotics, of course, most of them are operating behind fences, right?
Yeah.
It's mostly due to regulatory and health and safety requirements. And that was one of the big promises, of course, that with the introduction of cobots, even if we may not have fully collaborative workflows where we have really a human and a robot working directly together on the same piece, on the same task, at least we can have achieved something like better coexistence with even simple savings as floor space, right? We don't have to have whatever, a box of 10 by 10 meters where this robot is operating in, and whenever something needs to be done by a human, it needs to be pushed a button, it needs to stop, somebody needs to unlock a gate, enter this. With these sort of more cobot human aware systems, at least we could potentially pull down these fences, save floor space, which is incredibly important for our manufacturing sector, often because of the legacy buildings and facilities they're in. But at the same time, you know, that one hopefully then also makes time savings in the process of switching over things. So I think a lot of people are at the moment just, you know, going step by step, finding that quite interesting to go. And I've seen very few, well, beyond academia, let's say, where of course we are exploring truly collaborative task engagement of humans and robots working together. I've seen very few actual uptakes of truly collaborative human robot solutions yet in industry. I think most of them are about coexisting and maybe taking turns. One, here's a phase where the human operates, here's a phase where the robot operates, but very little has so far been explored in the domain of actual truly collaborative task engagement. There's quite some potential in there, I believe, but as I said, that comes down then also to see we need to then also think about the reward schemes for the human workers in there. For instance, then of course, if you're working with a robot, very quickly people will also explore ways to ensure that they come out best in this. And there's a lot of resistance potentially also from general human workforce, because of course we know that humans have that robots have the potential to, you know, replace labor to some extent. And in the end, that is also one of the things what clearly is an objective for the industrial players.
I do wonder as well, Mark, whether that, you know, the take up of these robots. I mean, I think as we talk in some of our other videos to our industrial partners and people and distributors of this type of hardware, to get their perspective will be really interesting. But personally, from my perspective, is that there is still a lot of misunderstanding and some, I guess, people don't understand the systems and what they can offer. I mean, I know that one of the major suppliers, some of their software-based integrated system, almost virtual barriers that they can build into their system as a safety, with the removal of physical and hard and interlock barriers. I'm pretty sure that a lot of people aren't aware of that capability within the hardware, within the system, the robotic system. We've seen examples. There's some really common ones where I mentioned earlier about loading press tools, for example, with a human operator, where I think, I can't remember the exact figure, but almost 50% of the additional barriers and light guards were removed because they could be implemented on the robotic system, giving more freedom for operation while still maintaining safety as well. So I guess people need to know about this, and obviously every robot manufacturer is different, but there's some real benefits there. And again, not having that physical guarding and hardware that you talked about, Mark, obviously can provide real advantages with some of these systems, and access and operation give real advantage to the day-to-day operation of this kind of equipment on a legacy line.
Let's move on a little bit. I'm thinking, notwithstanding the sort of the global picture, within the Midlands of the UK here, what kinds of businesses are adopting industrial automation solutions at the moment?
That's a very good question.
Well, I'm kind of asking because you're kind of implying warehouses and big businesses, but are others actually looking at this?
I think so, but I think some of the barriers we talked about earlier, Tracy, are still inhibiting the actual take-up, again, as Mark's mentioned, in terms of real take-up. And again, of course, there's not just buying a co-robot and investing in a system just for the sake of it. Clearly, SMEs, industry need to see the real benefit for that as part of their business strategy. And I think that's quite difficult. So I'm pretty sure currently, I haven't looked at the figures recently, but the UK, more generally, not just in the Midlands, lacks in the whole of Europe in terms of robot integration within industry. And I would imagine that's certainly true in the Midlands, but I don't want to talk out of turn there. But certainly for co-robotics, I think, that the educational cycle is still ongoing, and the actual integration, as far as I'm aware, is still fairly low. For a number of reasons that we mentioned earlier, including, of course, cost. But again, this modular approach that Mark referred to into existing legacy lines, I would say, if a company can obviously justify the expenditure as part of their business strategy, then that is clearly the way to go. Unless you're setting up a new venture, of course, and have the capital to invest in this equipment from the outset. To align with Industry 4.0 and the technology associated with that. But I think the take-up is still quite low. We know that for the UK as a whole, and I would imagine, with the fear of being shot down, that the Midlands is really no different to the rest of the UK.
Well, I'm going to come in with a little bit of of course, a Lincolnshire scope, because that's the area I'm most familiar with. If you look at Lincolnshire, the big sectors here really are food, agriculture and food. So we've got a lot of food production in here, and the University of Lincoln also has, as a sort of satellite campus, the National Centre for Food Manufacturing, where we really focus on a lot of the automation in the food sector and the food industry. One of the really, for me, fascinating projects was by a company called Olympus Automation, who made a first robotic chef. It's a massive robot that actually, rather than and replaces, in very simple terms, it replaces pumps to make ready meals with actual robots that can pour, which actually has benefits for the quality of the food we produce, rather than moving food or produce like soups and stews and stuff with pumps from one vessel to another and cook them. It's part of the overall movement of the goods, basically through the production process, where you have a big cooker robot that pours soup from one to another. So that is one example. The food industry in general actually is undergoing quite some changes because they really have the challenge of finding people to work in there. That also applies to agriculture. Myself involved in a number of agri-robotics projects. I think that's a big area. And surprisingly, we see even the uptake of collaborative systems there because, let's be honest, a big challenge is harvesting. And for a lot of the crops, full automated harvesting is not yet there. But we can again automate. It's a bit of a piecemeal approach if you went, but we can automate parts of it. So in one project, we are automating the transportation of goods when they are being harvested completely over large fields with fleets of robotic systems that go out into the fields of any sort of production environments in agriculture. So again, it comes down to actually facilitating the journey that I've been talking about. And I think, of course, from a Lincolnshire perspective, that's the big industrial challenge. We have also got quite some big players that are in automation, and I'm just going to mention A&P Rose, for instance. They're mainly focusing on packaging lines, where again, to accommodate the flexibility that is needed now, and also to reduce waste, etc. Where you want to much more customize to the actual goods you're packaging. Not everything is a square container, for instance. And again, this sort of customization adaptation that is required in that context is an interesting challenge, where they're also looking into more robotics and automation solutions.
And I think sorry, Mark, I think just to add to that, of course, I mean, there are many, but just off the top of my head, of course, we have PepsiCo in Leicestershire who use robotics as part of their production line. And of course, Toyota at Burmeston as well. So clearly they are companies who are using, particularly Toyota, extensive robotic and automated systems as part of their production lines. There are many others, of course, as well. But so I don't think we should be clear that there's a big implementation and adoption of this technology. Clearly, big companies I've named there. I think for me, and hopefully Mark would agree, that the challenge is more really, as we identified as a group on this initiative initially, is the SMEs and how they can get involved with this technology and how they can get involved with the adoption of the appropriate technology.
Absolutely. And from what you're saying, of course, it's about keeping the human in the loop and about training people to work with robots to improve productivity and efficiency of those SMEs so that they become our next generation big businesses, presumably.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks very much for highlighting the trends and the benefits. I think what we'll do now is we'll close this session, and what you can do in our next videos is find out a little bit more about how different businesses are working with the robotics that we've been talking about. So that's it from us now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, keep notifications on in order to receive a reminder about the content as we release it. And if you want to get in touch with any of us, you can find the links on our About page. Thanks very much for watching. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.